Alright, welcome everyone to another Discord TED Talk. This particular talk will be about competition preparation. As I mentioned in the caveat beforehand, my experience is with a handful of different disciplines. I'm going to focus on a couple, specifically part of the UPSIC organization, so from the US perspective, USPSA and Steel Challenge. But I'm going to cover a few examples, or at least a couple of areas that I find of most importance in terms of preparing for the day of a competition. Key areas here obviously are the equipment you'll need, exercises in terms of live and dry firing, getting to that day and to that level of proficiency, day of expectations, so when you show up, what to expect, and then post-competition, things to consider. And then of course, as always, open QA. This is recorded and will be shared for those who are unable to attend, so although you can't participate in the live QA, more than welcome to comment in the video or talk about it in the server. Happy to talk more and flesh out more about what you hear or see. Alright, so jumping right into it, let's go into the equipment aspect of this. So one of the larger questions here, don't get too lost in the sauce in terms of what's on the screen, but what kind of equipment do you need to bring? Primarily, what gun do you need to bring? So depending on the discipline and depending on the division will determine what gun you're allowed. So if you work backwards and you know what gun you have, you start figuring out which division and which discipline makes sense. As far as discipline goes, for USPSA, you could shoot any handgun for the most part, outside of 22 probably, and you could shoot PCC. Steel Challenge, you could shoot anything. Revolver, 22, PCC, normal handguns, all that kind of stuff. So like I mentioned, I'm going to speak to these two disciplines, but they break out different divisions. And it's kind of confusing if you're not in the know which division to really drill into, and thus which kind of equipment you need. So there's online resources and plenty of explanations that I actually have shared here in the notes of this presentation, so I could share that out with this presentation. But it helps drill out some key questions and will help narrow your answer in terms of what division you should be signing up for, depending on the type of gun you shoot. So for example, I shoot production, so it's a standard factory gun, no significant enhancements to the firearm. It's pretty much a readily available firearm that people could buy. So going down this list, what's your mag count? Since we're in New Jersey, our mag count should be about 4. Well, our mag count is reflective of the stage that we're trying to shoot. So you want to minimize the amount of standing reloads. So if you can reload on the move, you can do that. So it depends, obviously. So not as much of a relevant question. This is more so for those outside of Jersey who can have 3 or less mags. So if they have 2 mags that are 17 or 20 rounds a pop, then their options are a little more varied. Versus New Jersey, 10 rounds of mag, you're going to have to do a little bit more finagling. So based on what you answer, so for me it's going to be B, so I'm going to drop down to 5. Question here is using striker fire, double action, single action. If no, you're shooting limited. If yes, for me it is yes. I am shooting double action, single action, striker fire. So I'm going to jump down to the next question. Do I have any external modifications other than grip panels? So I don't have a thumb rest. I don't have an oversized mag release. I don't have a flared magwell. I don't have custom slide cuts. Now, flared magwell is outside of what's stock. So, for example, Glock Gen 5s have a flared magwell, but it's not extensively large. So there are some limitations, and these are just quick questions, but the rules explain what the distance or the size of the internal, the diameter from end to end of what the magwell is prohibited or not. So that'll help flesh that out. But for me, that's a no. I don't have external modifications, so I'm going to go straight down to 7. Want to load more than 10 rounds per magazine? Obviously in Jersey, I want to, sure, but I can't. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot production, as it mentions here. There are other divisions, obviously. There's single stack, there's limited 10, there's revolver, I believe. So this isn't extensive by any means, but these will cover the more common divisions that are really popular. Open, you can consider those race guns that are just souped up to the T with all kinds of modifications. Limited, it's basically open, but I think it's restricted to 10 rounds. I think it's a low cap open. Carry optics is an upgraded production, basically, and production is your bare minimum. All right, moving right along. Actually, another thing to consider as far as what gear to consider for your discipline or division. Other disciplines that I've shot, for example, steel knockdown, they don't require a holster. So for USPSA and steel challenge, well, for USPSA specifically, holster is required because unless you're shooting PCC, obviously, but revolver, carry optics, production, doesn't matter. You need a holster, and ideally you should have mag pouches. That just makes it more efficient because there will likely be movement and some reloading that you'll need to do. For steel challenge, you're stationary, so you're not running around except for one specific stage, but it's like you're taking 3 steps to the right, basically. For steel challenge, you need a holster if you're shooting center fire, and you don't need a holster if you're shooting a rim fire. So that can include a revolver, can include 22, and obviously PCC, no holsters needed. So the ready position for non-holstered firearms are going to be low ready. You're going to be pointing at a sign on the ground, so those are pretty prevalent. You'll be able to see that. And then everyone else just holsters up, and you're actually in surrendered position, so wrists above shoulders. Now, for other disciplines like knockdown, steel knockdown, where you're just trying to knock down plates and stuff, obviously there's a caliber limitation in terms of what you can bring. You don't want to bring a 22 to a steel knockdown because you're not going to be knocking down plates, so that's something to consider. There's also no holsters, so you don't really holster anything. You're just at a low ready, or your muzzle's on the table, basically, unless some people cheat, but I won't get into that. And then your mags, you can have mag pouches for steel knockdown, but otherwise you could just have them on the table next to you. There's going to be a little table next to you, so you could use that, but if you'd want a faster reload, obviously mag pouches are ideal. I can go on and on about discipline versus division and what kind of gear you'd want for each one, but I won't necessarily drill into that, so we'll leave it at that for now. Jumping into exercises from a live and dry fire perspective. First and foremost, be familiar with your equipment. That's the tools you're using, the firearm you're using, the magazines you're using. Understand how to reload, understand how to fire the firearm. Obviously, you don't want to just waste ammo, and you also don't want to be unsafe. So make sure you're safe with the firearm. But obviously, equipment familiarity and dry firing can all be done free of charge. You're doing it at home, getting familiar with what you have, getting your gear set up, your belt set up, all that kind of stuff. Dry firing is king in the shooting world. You want to make sure you dry fire as much as possible. It's going to help you build out those mechanics that drill in muscle memory for a lot of the activities you'll be doing. So as far as making sure you're working on movement, you could do that at home. You can aim and move. You can crouch walk. You can run to different positions. You can transition between targets. All this stuff you can do dry firing, and you can do this all with a dead trigger, so you don't have to necessarily rack your slide and get that active trigger pull. Like that's one exercise to consider. But you could just run a dead trigger or run a zip tie into your barrel so that it's not fully chambered or not in battery, and you'll have a somewhat live trigger. You won't feel the wall, obviously, but you could just run that trigger and as if you're pulling a regular trigger. But anyway, you don't need to have a live trigger to do any dry firing. It's all movement. It's all presentation. You want to make sure you got all that going on. Here in this presentation here, I've got it's a minute or so, minute and a half video that runs through a handful of presentation by Ben Steger. I think I'm saying his name right, but Ben Steger. It's a 15-minute dry fire drill, but he obviously doesn't take the full 15 minutes. He just gives you the drills that you could just do from presentation, continuous reps for presentation, slow draw, different hand positions in terms of working on your draw, turning and drawing, reloading and drawing, single hand, support hand drawing, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot you can do and really get familiar with while you're home that you don't have to worry about doing at the range. At the range, you should just be worrying about recoil management and, for the most part, making sure that your grip is on point. So not just recoil management, but making sure that those follow-up shots, you have a nice consistent grip that's going to help you with those consistent loads of fire. Because shooting one bullet at a time or one round at a time, it's nice if you're trying to be a marksman or if you're just doing something slow, but it's not realistic. If you're competing, you're going to want to shoot fast and a lot. So you have to make sure that your grip is consistent and it's where it needs to be. Otherwise, if you have a good grip for that first shot and that's it, everything else is gone to crap, then your draw and everything else is just not going to matter. You're just going to have a sloppy grip the whole way through. So that's something you want to make sure you do in live firing. There's plenty of free drills online, free targets online in terms of some live firing drills you can do, whether it's a cold start drill, whether it's different distances, engaging, obviously different sizes of targets, but the general goal is you want to try to aim small to miss small. I think that's what it is. So you can work through marksmanship while you're at the range. And then there are other aspects to consider as well. So having a target focus when you're firing, you want to have, if you're shooting big targets up close, you don't want to take as much time aiming. So it should be a flash presentation. You want to have a general consensus of where your sights are, but you're relying more on your grip and your presentation to point the gun where it needs to be, and you're firing, letting those rounds off. That's it. Versus farther shots, you want to slow down, really aim your sights in, and making sure that you're getting that shot off properly, making sure the trigger pull's consistent and smooth. You don't want to disturb those sights when you're firing. So there's a difference in terms of engagement, level of difficulty, obviously, and that's subjective towards the shooter. Whether you're good at shooting something at 7 yards or good at shooting something at 25 yards, it's going to differ regardless. So if you could shoot something fast at 25 yards and be good and hit the target and hit the A zone, then by all means, keep doing that. If that's not your thing, then obviously work your way up to that. But you'll be able to get there eventually. All right, moving right along. I'm going to skip the video. You guys can watch that after. Day of expectations. So you've done your dry firing, you've done your live firing, you're proficient, you have all the gear and equipment, you have your belt, holster, gun, mags, all that kind of stuff. Some spare parts, some spare tools, some oil for your gun, all that kind of stuff. You have that ready to go. Now it's day of. You registered, you show up. What's going on? So obviously arrival and registration. Well, first off, let's go ahead of that. For me, my morning starts obviously a little earlier. I try to wake up at least an hour or two, depending on how far it is, hour or two before I need to show up for registration, just so that I'm obviously waking up, need to do what I need to do, go to the bathroom, eat, drink coffee, go to the bathroom again, whatever it is. I want to be awake. I don't want to get awake, I guess. I'm probably saying that wrong. I don't want to try to get awake or on my way there, wake up. I'm failing words right now, but I'm starving. The point is, I try to get up and just making sure that I'm just awake and my day started. I don't want to have to rush to the range. I want to get up early enough so that I'm relaxed. I'm not rushing and really getting into a bad vibe off the start. Most of the time I won't eat breakfast, so I won't eat beforehand. I'll just drink some water, maybe a granola bar, but I won't eat anything until after the match. So you show up, arrival. There's going to be a registration booth for the most part. The matches that I've gone to, they always have registration booths. You either pay or don't, whatever the fee is. And then you load up your mags. If they aren't loaded already, you get your belt on, you get your gear ready and all that kind of stuff. Get your bag, get everything out of the car, and you're good to go. Most of the time, there's going to be a new shooter's orientation. So if you're new to competing, not necessarily new shooting, I mean, it's just a caveat word, but I mean, it's a catch-all word, but if you just never competed before, they go through the range commands. They go through the motion in terms of showing up to the line to fire, when you're ready to go, what commands to start, once you're done, what commands to wrap up, all that kind of stuff. So they walk you through that. They make sure your reloads are safe, your presentation's safe, all that kind of stuff most of the time. If they don't, then you're going to want to rely on your squad. So let them know that you are new to competing. You've never really done this before. You're obviously there and you know how to shoot for the most part, but definitely want to make it known. This way you're not going first and you don't know what you're doing. You're messing up. Everyone's been to their first match. It's okay to be new and not be awesome at doing something. So don't be embarrassed that you're not doing something right. Ask questions. You better be safe than sorry. It would suck that you do something wrong, you accidentally DQ yourself, and now you're just gone for the day. So all that preparation for nothing. So you want to make sure you're cognizant of what's going on around you. You're making sure you're safe with your gun handling. Don't worry about trying to do fast or do well. Just worry about, I guess, primarily don't DQ. Like, don't do anything unsafe to the point where you're gonna get disqualified. Anyway, after the new shooters orientation, which they'll do on the side, there's a match overview. Sometimes they'll debrief in terms of some unique stages, some things to watch out for during these matches, some sponsors, some upcoming events, whatever it is. Someone will give a spiel for the most part. And then they'll squad you up. You'll either know in advance because you squatted online, or day of, they'll start switching stuff around, so they'll call out squads. Once everyone's squatted up, you go through your stage, whatever your designated stage is for the first stage you're going to, and then you walk through the stage. So there will usually be a prompt. For USPSA, there's a prompt, so you read through that. You'll go through the procedure, the firearm condition when you're starting off, the rules of the stage, if there's anything in particular you need to know about how to start, that kind of stuff. And then you walk through the stage. So for USPSA specifically, there's a walkthrough where you look at every target. You try to figure out what's the most efficient way to engage this array of targets versus the next array. When do you want to reload? Can you engage that target from this distance, or do you have to go up close? So there's a whole bunch of gaming aspect to it. This is where the gamer comes in. You want to try to figure out what are your mandatory positions to fire, what are some optional positions to fire, and where can you consolidate those optional positions. So sometimes a mandatory position is going to be mandatory. You're going to have to take a target from a certain position. Some stages are just designed like that. And then other ones, you could probably take one target in various different positions. So you want to optimize that during your walkthrough, and then memorize it. Common practice that I'll do, and that I've taken actually from other shooters, is once I've gone through my walkthrough, I've gotten whatever feedback I want from other shooters. If I don't really have a clear vision for what I want to do, I'll go back to the starting line, or I'll go back to get out of everyone's way, and then I'll just visually walk through from start all the way to end. So I won't look at the targets. I'll look down, and you'll look like I'm jamming out with headphones or something, but I literally just walk through the motion without even looking at the targets, and I'll know, all right, these two are here. I'm going to reload in between, go to the next one, reload again, whatever it is. I'm going to run here. This is where I'm going to land. I'm going to land on the border and then figure this out and then lean for this shot. It's all mental. So you want to be able to get to figure that out so your plan is consistent. This way, it's so subconscious that when you're shooting, you're not going to be like, oh shit, completely forgot about that target, or which one was I supposed to shoot first, what was the round count, all that kind of stuff. So if you can get to the point where you visualize what your movement's going to be, and it's like 25 seconds tops, maybe 40 seconds if you're a little slower shooter or runner, but you're not shooting for that long, so it's not something that you need to stress about or study hours to do. It's just something that you walk through your 25 targets, and then you just figure out, all right, this is the route I'm going, and this is what I'm going to figure out, and then you just try to memorize that as best as possible, because you're only shooting, like I said, about 25 targets or so. All right, when it's your turn to shoot, they'll call your name, obviously. Ahead of time, you want to be ready, so have your mags ready, have whatever you need ready to go, so you're not wasting everyone's time getting ready when you're up. So they'll usually call whoever's on deck. I forget what the verbiage is, but the shooter, whoever's next, or whoever's deep, or whoever's in the hole, whatever it is, the next three shooters basically. So keep an eye on that, and then from there, just remember who's in front of you, and then every time you see that person go, you'll be like, all right, I'm next. That's it. I won't go into what goes on the line because I covered some of that in my last TED Talk in terms of introduction to competition, so I won't belabor that. Course of fire, obviously you need to understand the course of fire, and then there'll be commands for that, so I won't go into that. When you're not shooting, so when you're done, there's reset. So whenever a shooter's done, not necessarily when you're done, but when others are done shooting and the line is cleared and the range is cold, or at least your pit is cold and you're good to go, you'll want to reset the stage after pointing is done. So certain disciplines, like knockdown steel, you'll know pointing is done because they're done. All the plates are done. There's nothing to worry about. Just go up and reset the plates. Steel challenge, just go up and spray paint. That's it. But for USPSA, obviously they need to point each target. So once they're done, you point them, or you point them as they go and you just stay behind them basically. But the point is, you want to help out as much as possible. This way you don't delay and people are just sitting around not resetting the stage, and you just delay everyone else from starting, and eventually a squad behind you is catching up because no one's really doing anything. So just be mindful of that. All right, moving on. Post-competition, what happens after the match? So for me, obviously there's a packing up that everyone will do. The stage you end on is usually the stage you'll wrap up. So you put the stuff away, whether it's on some cart or some specific location, or maybe for steel challenge, for example, they just say leave it. It's literally they just drive up with their cart and then you just drop it in there, so they don't do much. But packing up all your gear, don't forget anything. Don't forget your gun. Don't forget mags. People forget mags all the time. Make sure you have everything you need. Double check, triple check, whatever it is. Wait for the results. Depending on who's the director or whatever it is, or what kind of match or where it is, the results will be posted eventually. And then for me, the most important part is self-examination. For me, I record myself during most of my matches, so I use that a lot to really drill into what my movements look like and sort of reflect on what my thought was or my thought process in the moment of shooting versus what I'm seeing. So a lot of times I'll see myself stuttering while I'm running the drill, and I'll reflect back and be like, yeah, I completely forgot that this target was here, that type of thing. So that'll just help me reiterate, all right, I need to work on some memorization skills. I need to work on planning my arrays a little better, that kind of stuff. Highlight some lessons learned. Obviously, I do this after every stage I shoot. As soon as I'm done, I'm just recapping, what did I do wrong? Obviously, you could always be more accurate, so that's not something to really belabor. Don't worry about you didn't hit the perfect shots. That's always going to be consistent. Your shooting skills will always be consistent in terms of something you should do better. So don't worry about that. It's more so about movement, what you could do more consistently, what can you do more smoothly, that kind of stuff. Areas to improve, obviously, I just covered that, so I won't go into that again. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all it really takes to prepare. I mean, a lot of it, I've mentioned this in the previous TED Talk, people think that it's real confusing, or it's just nerve-wracking, or they don't really know what to consider or what to expect, or they're not that good of a shooter. So they don't want to get into it. But again, these are just all myths and stuff that's in your head. Everyone has to shoot their first competition at some point. Just jump into it. Make sure you're safe. Don't worry about going fast. Don't worry about being the best, because you're not going to be the best. That's just flat out very likely, unless you just never competed in your life and you just happen to be a trainer or consistent shooter or whatever. But don't worry about any of that stuff. So that's just stuff that you learn. My first match, I was very nervous, but it was a smaller scale match. So by the time I got to some of these bigger matches, or quote unquote bigger matches, I was a little more confident in my shooting ability. Whether or not I would do well. Obviously I didn't, because I was pretty bad when I first started, but I wasn't unsafe at the end of it. That was pretty much the goal. Don't be unsafe. Don't get DQ'd. Don't endanger anybody's life or your life. So that's it, really. So I'm going to go ahead and see if anybody in the chat has any questions. If not, we can wrap this up, actually. Looking right now. Production. What if factory gun has things like flared mag well from factory, SIG P320, or extended mag release, slide release? He just quoted the Patriot. So for production specifically, USPSA has a production approved list. So for the USPSA division specifically, there is like an approved firearms list for production. This is only for production. There's the USPSA rules as well, so I'll open that simultaneously. But the production list, you could actually look up which guns, like I've never heard of this, Alpha, whatever. But if you wanted to look up SIG, for example, you could see all the SIG guns that are approved. Because for production, let's see, here we go. Top 5 right here. There are steps and criteria for a handgun to be accepted to the production gun list. 1, 500 manufactured and available to general public. 2, no magwell attachments or external flaring of the magwell. The lateral internal width, that was the wording, of the well may not be more than 1/4 inch wider than the lateral width of the magazine. So it's very specific. Lateral width of the well to mean the narrow width where mainspring housing is inserted. It's a lateral, whatever, yada yada. Must meet the criteria listed in the appendix of the current rulebook. So that's the other portion that I'll bring up in a bit. Gun must be viewed by NROI prior to its acceptance. So this is more important when it comes to like level 2 and level 3 matches. So these are like the higher up matches that are larger scale. I've yet to go to those. I definitely plan on hitting up those matches next year. But for the most part, my experience has been with level 1 local matches. So there's a little bit more tolerance, a little bit more forgiveness, and people aren't as anal about what kind of attachments or things like that. There's some obvious stuff that are like, wait, that's definitely not allowed in your division, that kind of stuff. So they'll just bump you up day of, whatever. Production gun approval form filled out, signed off, all right, whatever. So again, you can look up here, for example, SIG. You can see the different gun options, and I'm almost positive 320 is on here. Yeah, basically every model 320 here. So there's going to be standard factory magwell flares, and they've already considered, I'm sure they've done the measurements in terms of like magwell flaring, that kind of stuff. So if there is a question for production is it's a very small division. Not many people shoot production because people like optics are the future now. Like I mean, it's the constant. It's just like the go-to. I just happen to shoot production because I just prefer irons. My eyes don't do well with red dots, so that's why I'm in this division. Anyway, yeah, don't shoot above the berm. That's always solid advice. What is the best gun for competition, and why is it inevitably made by CZ? So you can, once you're a USPSA member, there's actually a magazine that you can get access to. I don't know what. Oh, here it is. No, it's not. Sorry. I don't know. Here it is. Actually, I don't even think you have to be a member. So they'll do, I think they do annual. Yeah, the annual one. So the annual one, they actually do surveys of, and this is at the like national competition level. They'll do surveys of each division, and it highlights some key demographics about stuff that people are bringing to the match. So obviously here you have eye, ear, pro. You've got holster manufacturer, mag manufacturer, your belt system. Eventually they go into which guns to get into and whatnot, or at least what guns people have. Here we go. Firearm custom shop. So for the open division, 20% the most common were STI or staccatos. So I think those are the 2011s, right? And then you've got your SV Infinity, Phoenix Trinity. I don't even know what these are. So if I drop down, let's say for production is going to be CZ USA. Tangfolio is pretty close there. Glock is pretty popular. Sig Beretta, Walther. So they do surveys like this, so you can get a pulse for like what's common, and that's generally a pretty good telltale sign that something's doing well, or it just has enough hype. But for production, obviously CZ is dominating the scene. So for me, I went from Glock to CZ, and it's definitely a big improvement for competition, and I definitely don't regret it. Any other questions? I actually want to jump into the rules real quick. So going back into the divisions, so they actually go into more division details here. So there's a wide list of rules that are definitely worth knowing if you're going to take this a little more seriously, because there's little stuff that you want to make sure you're catching on, and you don't want RO to say the wrong thing and that you get penalized for something that's not something to be penalized about. So it's good to be informed, not necessarily know every single word, but the appendix section is what's key. So I reference this page 99 a lot, just because this is my division, but every other division is going to have their own section too. But in this section, appendix D4, it's going to go through the same questions for every division. So this is limited 10. It goes through the list of questions in terms of what's your power factor, what bullet weights, what magazine sizes, what's the handgun size that you're permitted, what's the handgun weight you're permitted, authorized modifications, internal modifications, slide, milling of slide, aftermarket slides and barrels, enhancements you can make. And the way the rules are listed, and I think there's a caveat above, I forget where it is, but if it's not explicitly allowed within these sections, then it's implied that it's prohibited. So that's one thing to consider. So if you're looking for, hey, is this extended magazine release allowed? I would go into, I think it's external component. Yeah, right here. So exchange of minor external components. So it's considered minor. Sights, firing pins, etc. I don't know why firing pin retainers is external, but anyway. Magazine releases, yada, 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 may be replaced with OFM or aftermarket parts. So that's cool. Magazine releases can be changed. It's a minor external component. That's what they consider it. So how they define it, I don't know. This is a board of directors at the USPSA level goes in and changes these rules whenever they feel like. Sometimes not as often as people wish they do, but and then they go into some explicit don't do this type stuff. But for the most part, it's more like you're allowed to do this, and then you can't do anything else, basically. Let's see what some other rules, like double action, single action here. So for me, double action, single action, because I am the gun I shoot is double action, single action, I need to start with my hammer down. Versus if I were in a different division with the same gun, I could start with the hammer cocked, but my safety has to be on. So single stack, for example, right here, single stack, it's very likely, I don't think there are single stack. Actually, I think that's wrong. Single stack is usually like your 1911 division. So this is going to be, since they're single action for the most part, it's going to be hammer cocked, safety on. I don't think they're, oh yeah, only 1911 production style type pistols are allowed. So the ones that are based on Browning pistols. All right, anyway, this has gone on for a little longer than I was hoping, but there's a lot of information here. This is meant to be the next level. I'd imagine there's going to be more in terms of what other things to consider for competition stuff. So stay tuned for upcoming Discord TED Talks. I personally enjoy giving talks about competition stuff, so happy to share what I've learned so that other people can get a head start and they don't have to learn the hard way. All right, thank you.